Hey everyone, it took me some time to do a new video, and I'm reaching out from quarantine, which you can tell by my hair. However, I want to make this a real quick video to fix your aggressive preset setup, or also fix old setup from the old patch, because with the new patch, there were quite some changes to the aerodynamics simulation in the game, which kind of can have an adverse effect on the old setups or the aggressive presets, because Kunos basically just ran out of time to kind of revisit all the existing aggressive preset setups. So it's just likely that you'll at some point come across a setup on the cars that were in the game already, which are now behaving a little bit strange for how the aerodynamics have changed. This won't be the case for the latest 2020 Mercedes, and it won't be the case for the Ferrari Evo, because of course, they got new sets anyway, but for all the old cars, this is going to be very useful. I've mentioned it in another video before that the yaw simulation has changed, and essentially this means the car is always traveling into a different direction than it's actually pointing, and the angle in between these two directions is what the yaw angle is, and the higher it gets, the more likely is the car is unable to tolerate it, and well, you can spin. Which means this is particularly a thing for fast corners, and I'll show you a few examples what I mean. Before, though, I'll show you this image, which Aris put on his stream just to make you understand what was happening here. Just to give you a brief idea, it visualized the yaw angle, which is the red box on top left there on the screen, and then you have a differentiation between the old simulation and the new simulation. So the dotted line shows the old stuff. The now, the gradient kind of shows the new simulation. And you can see that in low speed area, now there's a little more tolerance for that. You can use slight drift angles, very slight, okay? Very slight angles of these throughout the corner without using too much aerodynamic grip. But if you come to the high speed area, you can see that the early part, the gradient is above the dotted line, which means there's a little more tolerance to yaw early on. But as soon as the yaw angle increases, and pretty much above 10 degrees is where you have a really sudden and massive drop in downforce, which essentially leads the cars to spin. Looking at the examples, that pretty much means in all fast corners where potentially you are even decelerating, hitting the brakes, you see very snappy behavior. So I picked out a few examples from Silverstone with the Audi, where it seems to be a bigger issue, somewhat like the Porsche, for example, has this as well, but it's also true for some front engine cars. Looking at the Audi here, coming for the S's, you can see that as soon as I turn in, it's so twitchy, and as soon as the yaw angle increases a bit, the car just snaps on me and I really can't control this. The same kind of is true if we move a couple corners further, across the old start-finish line. Same thing really, fast corner, turning in with high aerodynamic load on the tires, and then the yaw angle increases, and all of a sudden the rear snaps away from you. The reason then is, if we look a little at the screenshots I made from the setup here, the first one is from the aggressive preset, how it is in the game, and you can see the aero balance is like 2.5% negative there, which means it's slightly weird bias, but don't take that number for granted. And that's how the setup comes. But if you look at the changes that I then do to it, which is just a tiny adjustment on the right height or the wing, just my target is to move this aero balance number at the bottom backwards, and I've now moved it quite a bit. And now you'll see that the car is a lot more stable through these corners and should give you more confidence, and that's already the main fix that you need to apply. Looking at the same corners again just now, you can see that now the car turns in, doesn't kick the tail out, there's very little problems overall, and I can just go through these S's with a lot more confidence without being scared of the car killing me. The same then kind of is true for the other corner that we've been looking at, and now you can see that the car is also way more likely to stay in line, just with that really tiny change to the setup. Just to show you one more example, which is one of the most tricky corners I think of the game, is Suzuka Turn 1. where you come at a very high speed to 50 to 60, something like that, and you already have to turn in before you hit the brakes, or it's kind of in conjunction, which usually means there's a lot of pitch in the car, and which means the rear comes up, the front goes down, the rake angle in the car increases, but you really have to worry about all that stuff. Just have to know high-speed corners, braking and turning at the same time can cause problems, and this is exaggerated now by the new physics, which are way less tolerable, or they tolerate that less now, with less yaw angle tolerance from a certain degree. As I said, the same is or can be true for the mid-engine cars. Sorry, not the mid-engine, we've seen that. For the front-engine cars. And might be not as pronounced, but I know the Aston was one of these cars that are normally driven with a very high rake angle. And I feel just with the new patch, you kind of have to decrease that a little bit to allow the car a little less dynamic rake change, a little less dynamic balance change of the aerodynamics. So the same really applies here for the Aston, but you can see it's not as hard to control, but it still can become a problem, and therefore we want to apply the same principle here to the Aston. And just to point this out, let's take a look at the Lamborghini setup, for example, because earlier with the change on the Audi, we moved the aerodynamic balance back almost by 2% or something, but it's not necessarily the same on all cars, and you can get away with less, or the car is just generally not as sensitive to these changes. And before and after in the Lamborghini can result in as much as a shift of 0.5%, and this can already be enough. So don't go by these general values of, I know, this has to be shifted by 1% or 2 or a half. It really depends on car, really depends on the corner, depends on the track, and how well you are able to handle these oversteery situations. So just take into account you need to somehow do something about it. May it be 0.5% up to 2% or even more depending on the car. Just keep it in the back of your mind. If you experience these troubles, don't hesitate. Go to the setup, increase the rear ring, lower the rear ride height, for example, maybe increase front ride height just to shift the aerodynamics backwards a bit, and that should be fine. I guess this is it for now. Wish you a good week in lockdown. Germany's shutting everything down from Wednesday, so I'll be here for a while. Have a good one. Bye.